His hands gripped my hips with a force that made me bite down on my lip just to stay silent. We were in the narrow hallway outside the guest room, shadows draped across the walls, the only light coming from the cracked bathroom door. I braced my palms against the wall, cold grounding real, while his chest pressed firm and urgent against my back. My breath fogged in the still air, and even the distant hum of the fridge downstairs felt deafening, like the whole world might hear. When Noah's lips grazed the curve of my neck, it wasn't teasing. It was purposeful. My body shuddered, like I'd been struck by lightning nerves alight with every unspoken word. And when he whispered my name, it didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like surrender. His fingers slid beneath my shirt fingertips, brushing skin that hadn't been touched in far too long. I shivered hard enough to almost pull away. Almost. Instead, I leaned back into him. And God, the way he held me, it was desperate, like he was clinging to something he didn't know he needed until that second. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was unraveling. I didn't feel shame or fear. I felt like I'd stepped into a place I wasn't allowed to long for. I'd been holding myself together through the slow-motion collapse of my marriage, through the empty aftermath that followed. But when Noah touched me, I realized I'd been holding my breath for far too long. He wasn't supposed to be this. He was supposed to be safe, familiar, off limits. I'm 38. I've seen enough of life to know the difference between healing and hiding. I told myself I was doing the former. I told myself I was done falling into people I couldn't have. And then he showed up. My best friend's younger brother. Just staying for a few weeks, she said, while he got back on his feet. He was kind in the small ways that undid me, fixing the leak under the sink, that my ex never cared about, asking about my day without distraction, in his eyes, laughing with me over midnight toast in the kitchen, like it was sacred. He never looked at me like I was damaged, and that broke something open. What would you do if the only person who made you feel whole again was the one person you could never touch? Noah's mouth trailed along my shoulder, and I turned to face him. His hands cupped my cheeks, calloused and trembling. It felt like if he let go, I'd vanish. You weren't supposed to mean anything, I whispered into his breath, but he kissed me anyway. Hard, clumsy, like neither of us had practiced the language of want in a long time. I clung to his shirt like it could anchor me. The hallway was narrow and suffocating. Every creak of the house sounded like judgment. That fear only made everything sharper. My back thudded against the wall as he pressed in closer, breathing ragged at my neck. He smelled of clean soap and something raw and human I couldn't name. This doesn't fix anything, I murmured, not pushing him away. I know he rasped his forehead, resting against mine. But for now, I don't hate myself, and neither did I. If you've ever jumped into something you knew would break you just because it made you feel alive again, you know what I'm talking about. Subscribe, because the truest stories are never easy to hear. When it ended, we didn't move. Just forehead to forehead, breathing in silence, like the walls could hear our guilt. A floorboard creaked somewhere distant, a reminder that the world hadn't stopped spinning for us. Noah's hand stayed at my waist as he looked toward the staircase, then back at me. "We shouldn't," I whispered. "I know," he said again, but neither of us moved. The next morning felt dreamlike. I sat at the kitchen table, still in my robe, cradling a mug of coffee that had gone cold. The clock on the wall ticked far too loud. Every sound was too loud, my thoughts too heavy. Then Noah walked in, barefoot, hair damp from a shower, a plain grey t-shirt clinging to him like the air itself knew what we'd done. He didn't look at me at first. Just got a glass of water, leaned against the counter and drank slowly, as if nothing had happened. But everything had. I'd spent the last year rebuilding what was left of me. A 12-year marriage reduced to a flash on my husband's phone screen. A text I was never supposed to read. "I love you," he wrote. But not to me. After he left, I promised myself I'd pour into healing, therapy, yoga, journals with neat lists of gratitude. I told everyone I was thriving. I was barely surviving, eating alone at a table meant for two, sleeping in a bed that still smelled like someone who betrayed me. I pretended to be fine. I wore that lie like a second skin. And then Noah arrived, my best friend's brother. Younger than me, quiet, steady. He needed a place to stay for a while, and I had the space. It was supposed to be simple. I didn't see it coming, but once I did, I couldn't unsee him. The first week felt harmless. Like nothing could happen if we just kept our hands clean and our conversations light. Luca fixed the cabinet that always swung open when the wind blew too hard, carried in groceries without being asked, and stayed up watching old black and white films with me when my insomnia returned like an old friend. It was the little things that started chipping away at the wall I'd spent months rebuilding. His hand grazing mine when we reached for the same mug. The way he'd lean against the kitchen doorway, like he lived there, asking me about my day with a kind of attention that felt rare. One night, rain came down hard enough to rattle the windows. We curled up under a shared blanket on the couch and talked until the sky turned grey. I told him things I hadn't dared say out loud before, not even to my therapist. How I felt invisible most days. How I hated the echo of my own footsteps in a house that used to feel alive. How I sometimes ate dinner standing up just so I didn't have to sit alone. But Luca didn't flinch. He didn't look at me like I was a crumpled thing. He just listened. Maybe that was what unraveled me. That steady gaze, that stillness, that rare ability to sit with silence and not try to fix it. And the way he made me laugh. Real laughter, the kind that makes you forget you've been sad. I started noticing him more than I should have. The way his shirt clung after his morning jog. The subtle scent of his cologne that lingered in the hallway long after he passed through. I'd catch myself staring when he wasn't looking, until one night I caught him staring back. We didn't speak about it. We didn't need to. We just let it happen. Touches that lasted a breath too long. Pauses that felt loaded. Moments that stretched on, daring us to name them. But we never did. And then came that night. The sound of him closing the bathroom door. The floor creaking. the glow under the guest room. I stopped walking. I didn't even know why. Something in my chest had already answered before my brain caught up, and now I couldn't stop replaying it. His hands on my hips, my back against the hallway wall. The weight of him grounding me like gravity had shifted. The worst part wasn't that it happened. It was how right it felt, like the first inhale after months of suffocating in my own skin. I looked up from my coffee and there he was, Luca leaning against the counter, glass in hand. His lips parted like he was about to speak, but he didn't. Just nodded. Barely. Then walked out. The silence he left behind felt louder than anything I'd heard in months. The days after blurred. Time passed in scenes, not hours. We didn't talk about that night, but it hung between us. In the way he passed behind me in the hallway, the way I stopped breathing when he stood too close, the way silence stretched too long when it was just the two of us. One evening, I was slicing carrots in the kitchen when I heard him behind me. The floor creaked, and I knew it was him before I turned. He didn't touch me, but I felt him there. The air got heavier. My hands shook just a little. "Smells good?" He said, his voice low, almost shy. "Thanks," I replied, barely louder than a breath. His hand grazed my back when he reached for a glass. Just a brush. Nothing dramatic. But everything inside me responded like an alarm. We sat across from each other at dinner. The table felt too small. Our knees brushed. I chewed slowly, fork clinking against ceramic. He asked how my day was. I asked if he'd heard back about any interviews. We sounded normal. We looked normal, but beneath every word, there were questions neither of us dared say aloud. That night, I found him in the living room, sitting on the couch. An old movie playing quietly. I stood in the doorway, unsure why I'd even come down. "Can't sleep?" he asked, eyes flicking to mine. I shook my head. He patted the cushion beside him. I sat. We didn't say much. Just let the film flicker in front of us, while time moved slowly. At one point, my shoulder brushed his. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. His warmth seeped into me like light under a closed door. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I let it out. "Does it feel wrong to you?" I asked, my voice almost invisible. He turned his head, looked at me like he was deciding whether to lie. "It feels like something I can't stop thinking about," he said. Quiet. Honest. His hand shifted on the couch, just barely. Close enough that our fingers were almost touching. "Is that bad?" he asked. I didn't answer, not with words. I just let my hand slide a little closer until our fingers brushed. Tentative, deliberate, the smallest contact. But it hit me like a thunderclap. A reminder that sometimes what you fear most is the only thing that makes you feel alive. The flicker from the television lit the side of Luca's face, cutting his profile into something sharp and still. I stared too long, wondering if it was always this dangerous to want someone this much. The next day it got worse. I was leaning over the stove when he stepped in behind me, reaching past to grab a spoon. His chest brushed my back, breath warm against my ear. I froze, my hand clenched around the counter's edge like it could tether me to some version of sense. But he didn't move. And neither did I. Later that morning, in the hallway, We nearly collided. I was coming out of my bedroom, and he was passing by. We stopped inches apart, so close I could smell the rain-washed scent of his cologne. His gaze flicked down to my mouth. Only for a second. Then he turned and walked away. My knees went weak. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting every near miss. Every time we almost fell back into that place. And I knew deep down, I was no longer wondering if it would happen again. I was wondering when it happened on another rainy night. The house was silent. Too silent. All I could hear was the rhythmic tapping of water against the gutters outside. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot, wrapped in nothing but an oversized sleep shirt. The fridge hummed its steady lullaby, and I stared out the dark window with an unease I couldn't name. Then footsteps, slow, heavy, measured. He appeared damp from the rain hair clinging slightly to his forehead. He didn't say a word, just stood in the doorway and watched me, like he was trying to decide if he could survive another moment without touching me. I tightened my grip on the glass in my hand. "You're up late," I said, voice thin, barely there. "So are you?" he replied, stepping closer. His shirt was darkened by rain clinging to his frame, and I couldn't look away. I should have moved, should have left the room. But I didn't. In 2 strides, he was beside me. His hand brushed mine where it rested on the counter. The clock ticked too loud. The kitchen light felt too dim. The smell of rain still clung to him. "I can't keep pretending I don't want this," he whispered, voice frayed at the edges. "I don't want to lie to myself anymore." His hand found my waist, gentle but certain. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed the front of his wet shirt and pulled him into me. His mouth crashed into mine, rough, hungry, messy, and I sank into him like I'd waited lifetimes. He gripped my hips tight, backing me into the edge of the counter, and I welcomed the pressure, welcomed the certainty. The kiss deepened like caution had been locked outside with the rain. My fingers tangled in his damp hair, and he groaned against my lips like he'd been starving for this. He lifted me onto the counter like I weighed nothing, and I wrapped my legs around his waist, instinctively pulling him close. His hands slid up my sides under my shirt palms, warm, touch reverent. I gasped when his lips moved to my neck, urgent, unrelenting. I clung to him as if he were oxygen. The kitchen disappeared. The only thing I could hear was the rain pounding against the windows, the thrum of the fridge, and our breathing, wild, ragged. "This doesn't fix anything," I whispered into the side of his neck, trembling. "I don't care," he murmured. "Just don't stop." We didn't. Every sound sharpened. The soft creak of the counter, the hum of the fridge, my breath hitching, his quiet, needy groans. My nails clawed his back. His hands never let go. It wasn't soft or sweet, it was raw and wild, the kind of intimacy that strips you down to your soul. It wasn't a mistake, it was survival. When it was over, his forehead pressed to mine, our bodies still trembling, our breath tangled in the silence. His thumb traced my cheek, slow, anchoring me to the moment to him. "I don't regret it," he whispered. Neither did I, and that terrified me most of all. The morning after felt hollow. I stood at the sink, toothbrush and hand eyes, locked on a stranger in the mirror. Me, same face, same eyes, but different, like something had cracked open that I wasn't ready to name. My hair was a mess, lips still tingling with the memory of his. I rinsed my mouth, unable to look at myself too long, before guilt wrapped its fingers around my throat. Downstairs, Noah was already in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a mug of coffee. He looked up when I walked in. That one look, just a second, made my stomach knot. I could still feel him on me. He didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence was deafening. I poured myself some coffee. The sound of liquid hitting the mug felt impossibly loud. I sat across from him like we were strangers, like nothing had happened, but everything had. The clink of my spoon in the cup, the way we carefully avoided eye contact. It was like drowning in invisible tension. I should move out, he said quietly, not looking at me. I froze. My fingers gripped the mug like it could keep me steady. Is that what you want? I asked, though. My heart already knew the answer. He hesitated. No, but maybe it's what we need. I said nothing. My chest ached in ways I didn't have words for. That day I went through the motions. Groceries, laundry, folding sheets. Like they weren't a battlefield of memory. But the weight of it never left. Every hallway where it happened felt haunted. The scent of his cologne on a sweatshirt draped over the chair sent me fleeing from the room. That night, I found him again. Same couch, same dark room. TV casting flickers across his face like a ghost of yesterday. I sat beside him, hesitating. He didn't look at me, but his hand rested near mine on the cushion, just close enough to feel the heat radiating. Do you regret it? I asked. My voice cracked open like a wound. He turned slowly. No. Do you? He asked. I shook my head. My throat burned. I don't know if that's worse. We didn't touch. Not that night. We sat still in the space between us. The kind of silence that makes you ache in your bones. We both knew this distance wouldn't last. The next few days were torture. Brushed shoulders in the hallway. Lingering stares neither of us meant to give. Like living with a lit match and pretending not to smell the smoke. One night at dinner, I dropped my fork. When he bent down to retrieve it, his shoulder brushed my thigh. My heart forgot how to beat. Sleep became a distant dream. I'd lay in bed, eyes wide open, ceiling blurred by tears. My body ached for him. My mind screamed at me to stop. I told myself I was healing, that this wasn't who I was anymore. But every time I heard his footsteps in the hallway, or the sound of his door clicking shut, I felt that thread pulled tighter. Maybe it wasn't healing. Maybe it was infection. It all unraveled the night Camille, his sister, and my best friend showed up without warning. I was in the kitchen making tea when the doorbell rang. She waltzed in with a smile like she didn't just detonate a bomb. Noah froze in the hallway. I saw it, that flicker of panic in his eyes, before he buried it. She stayed for dinner. The three of us sat around the table, and I wanted to disappear. Every glance felt like a blade. When she asked Noah to pass the salt, her eyes lingered on him, then on me like she was stitching a truth together with silence. My hand shook around my fork. After she left, I found him in the living room. She knows I whispered. He rubbed a hand over his face. Maybe he said. Or maybe we're just paranoid, but his voice didn't sound convinced. This is going to destroy everything I said. Barely breathing, he stepped closer. So close, I could feel his warmth again and hated how much I leaned toward it. Then tell me to stop, he whispered, voice breaking. Please, just tell me. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Instead, I grabbed his shirt and pulled him in. Our lips collided again. Desperate, breathless, like trying to survive a storm by stepping straight into its heart. Our bodies moved together in the shadows of the living room, while rain hammered the windows. When it ended, there was no relief, just emptiness. I pressed my forehead to his chest, still trembling. We can't keep doing this, I whispered. I know, he said. His hands were warm against my back, steady, familiar. But I don't know how to stop wanting you. Then we heard it. A door upstairs creaked open. We broke apart like fire touching water. My heart punched my ribs. We stared at each other, breathless, terrified. One heartbeat away from being exposed. That night I sat alone in my room. The rain crashed against the roof. I stared at my reflection in the black window, searching for something that resembled strength. My phone buzzed. It was him. I'll leave tomorrow. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. Tears slipped down without permission. I'd reached for him like he was the only thing keeping me afloat. But maybe I wasn't drowning. Maybe I was dragging him down with me. And still, I would do it all again. And that is the story of Eleanor, a woman who seemed to have lost everything, but in the end, found herself in what seemed to be broken. Maybe you're going through uncertain days. Maybe you're facing doors slamming in front of you. But who knows? After each fall, you are reborn strong and truly yourself. If you're watching until the end, thank you for listening to a journey full of tears, love, and forgiveness. Maybe somewhere in Eleanor's story, you have seen a part of yourself. The pain that no one understands, the difficult decisions, or simply the feeling of someone quietly being there. Don't forget to subscribe to the Love and Tears channel if you want to continue accompanying the stories that make our hearts flutter. Not because of the tragedy, but because of the truth and humanity inside them. And before you turn it off, tell me where you're watching from. Or share something you've never dared to tell anyone. Who knows, your silent tears could be the beginning of a new journey. We'll see each other again in the next story. Because at Love and Tears, tears aren't just for crying. They're for healing.